Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Let's Play Mordheim City of the Damned. A new beginning, tips and tricks, and of course, new information that I have, new tips that I have about the game. First of all, the most obvious thing is that you always have the same warband, developing it along the way, and the enemy always gets a new warband, newly equipped, newly trained, fresh from the start. Yes, there could be wounded in the enemy team, but basically the enemy is always getting a new team. What does that mean for you? As you cannot outnumber the enemy, because the enemy will always have the same number of troops that you have, you can only outperform them. As the difficulty levels, normal, brutal, deadly, hard, tell you that the enemy is always a little bit stronger or far more stronger or deadly stronger than you are, you will have also problems in out-qualifying them. Because your quality, the quality of your troops will always, in level, be best, even to the enemy, normally worse than the enemy. What does that mean? You will have to train your troop specifically for certain things, and you must keep your troops alive. That means defense and staying alive is king. The obvious answer to the first way to stay alive is deployment. Of course, you only take deployment at your wagon, because everything from patrols to scattered is deadly. That you can influence by picking the mission. Second, positioning and tactical movement on the map. There is very little you can do wrong except getting isolated. Now, some people say, I don't wear heavy armor with my troops because then the heavy armor troops get isolated. No, they're not. They get isolated because you send your fast troops forward to gather stuff and leave your heavy armed troops behind. So, there is something you can do about that. Stay together. Then there is the RNG, the random number generator. There's this thing you cannot influence, but you can make it harder for the RNG to kick your ass. How do you do that? You let him roll often to get you damaged. And you try to influence the rolls. What does that mean? In order to stay alive, the first thing to understand is that if someone tries to hit you, the first thing he must overcome is your melee resistance. That means that must be as high as possible. That is influenced by your agility, by your weapon skill, and if you have a shield or not, and certain skills. That basically means in the beginning, when you can replace your warriors and heroes easily, you go for two-handed weapons because you want to make damage before damage occurs. Later in the game, you want to go for shield and one-handed weapons because you want the melee resistance. You want to stay alive as long as possible. Longer than the enemy in any case. Of course you can go in with a two-handed weapon, but later on there are enemies and charges and monsters that can take you out with a single attack. And as the enemy can move all his forces in his turn, he can surround one of your troops, no matter how good you position them, and attack him with 2 or 3 guys at one time. And if that character is then, or that henchman is then not prepared to survive that ordeal, you will lose him. So you have to do something that every warrior on himself can at least survive one turn until reinforcements are ready to help out. That again means melee resistance is the first thing the enemy has to overcome. Second is your defensive stat, your stance. May it be dodge, may it be parry, may it be sidestep, or may it be web of steel. But the point is, in many occasions, you will not be able to parry, you will not be able to dodge, because, for example, you were in ambush mode. And even if you have got Prowl or Onslaught, you will only have one dodge or one parry. So, if you get attacked multiple times, and that is what kills you, you will not be able to dodge all the attacks, and you will not be able to parry all the attacks. So dodge and parry are not your lifesavers. They're nice to have, but they're not your lifesavers. You do not build on them, or you dig your own grave. You build on melee resistance, because melee resistance is always active. unless you're stunned. But generally, against every attack, no matter how many, melee resistance stands. So does armor proficiency. Yes, there are spells that ignore armor proficiency. Armor class, damage reduction. Excuse me, that's what I meant. There are spells that ignore armor. There are attacks that ignore armor, but the spells do not do a lot of damage, and the weapons are rare. And even the weapons do not reduce your armor to 0. They only reduce your armor to a certain amount. So you want to have your armor as high as possible. 55 is the normal max that you can get without using too much skill or too much runes. Even if the enemy reduces this by about 20 or 25%, you still got a lot of armor to save your ass. Now you think what I think. Let me be damaged, I will heal myself. The Sisters of Sigmar can do that, yes? Well, yes and no. They can heal, but they can only heal the surrounding allies in a very, very, very short distance, and you cannot pack a lot of people in this very short distance range. And if the spell goes wrong, and spells go wrong a lot of times in this game, you might knock out your caster completely, you might knock out everyone around in a greater distance, or you might give them all an open wound. And that is a risk that is simply not worth it. So, take heal and throw it out the window. It's off. No healing spells. That leaves us with a single conclusion that in order to get a high level group as we need it, we need shield, one-handed weapon and heavy armor. That, as bad as it sounds, takes out the Skaven, because the Skaven are there for speed. Yes, they're cunning little fellas, they're very, very fast, but what does it help you if they die all the time, or more often than others? You want to keep your people alive, and you can make your people as fast as the rats, well, nearly as fast as the rats, if you skill them right and if you equip them right. And they stay alive. They're not as squishy as the Skavens. That leaves you with the human mercenaries, the Sisters of Sigmar, and the Cult of the Possessed. Now, how to root out the next? Well, let's go for the human mercenaries. The human mercenaries, their real strength lies in ranged combat. In theory, they can take their warband special skill and get Hunter and get an extra strategy point every time they aim. If the dice are on your side, that is. And then you can use a skill called Introspection to get 1 offensive points for 3 strategic points. So in theory, you can squeeze an extra shot out of each and every character if you do it right with the humans. But there comes the point. If you use a weapon, a ranged weapon, you have no shield in your hand, and if the enemy then closes in on you, you're dead. Furthermore, we're playing combat in a city here. Ranged combat is not gonna be very useful. Yes, you will come to occasionally a situation where you say, oh, if I had a gun, I would be so glad. Yes, but most of the time the enemy will be close enough for you to spit him in the eye, and then a ranged weapon is the last thing you want to have in your hand. So, human mercenaries out of the window. Leaves us with Sisters of Sigmar and the Cult of the Possessed. Sisters of Sigmar have one great benefit. They are the only warband that can use their strategic points in close combat after the engagement, which means in round 2 of a close combat, you will have, if your hero or if your henchman is trained up fully, 6 strategic points, for example. You will need 4 of them for Web of Steel or Sidestep. That will leave you with 2. Now you can say, I don't need this for 2, just let them rot. That is a waste of resources. A Sister of Sigmar can learn a spell or skill called Prayer of Swiftness, which will give her a dodge bonus for the 2 strategic points she normally would not use when engaged in close combat. So actually this ladies here can bolster their defenses by the use of strategic points in close combat after round 1. And the Sisters of Sigmar can make an army or warband completely consisted of people that use heavy armor. Well, The human mercs can do that too, but the sisters can do it well, and they have this dodge bonus thing. The only problem is you'll leak in damage. A one-handed weapon, you will have problems getting enough damage out of it. In the beginning, of course, they will fight with the two-handed flails, which is the best two-handed weapon there is. And after that, they might fight either with a Sigmarine Warhammer, which is quite nice, or with a flail, which is quite nice as well. They have excellent weapons. Problem is, their real strength comes out that they have a lot of magic users, or celestial magic users, priests, better so to say. And they're dangerous to blow themselves up as well as the normal mages. So, Sisters of Sigmar, the only ones who can use their strategic points left over from after round 1. Very, very defensive, but they do not have the damage potential. That's their problem. That brings us to the Cult of the Possessed. The Cult of the Possessed have a special skill called Blood Ritual, I think. No, Blood Offering is it called. It will enable you to attack, and if you hit the enemy, and you have trained this skill up to mastery, you will be able to boost all your other attacks after this first special attack by 50% damage and 10% critical. That means, if you're using a one-handed weapon and you've got 9 offensive points with your hero because he's level 10, and I'm always speaking about the end game here, because in the beginning of the game it does not make any difference which warband you take. You can do it. Later on in the game it will become harder and harder and harder and harder, and that's the point where it counts how you build your warband from the beginning. Now the Cult of the Possessed can use this blood offering thing, which means that they will enhance each attack after the first by 50% damage and 10% more critical, which in effect means that they will do more damage with a one-handed weapon and a shield, I mean far more damage, than someone aimed with a two-handed weapon. With a two-handed weapon you will get 3 attacks out of your character. Let's say he will do about 80 damage with each attack. You know, each attack after the first one is reduced by 15% damage. The second attack, or the third attack better so to say, will then be reduced by 30% of damage. So we're about 250, 260 damage at best. With the Blood Offering skill, you will have 4 attacks. And with the one-handed weapon and the right strength, you will do about 50 damage. And the attacks after that will be each done with 75 damage. Maximum damage for calculation purposes, that is. So, in total, you're doing nearly 300 damage, and that is not calculated that you're doing a critical. You get my point. You can be far more effective with a one-handed weapon and this blood offering skill than you can do with any other character class. Plus, the Cult of the Possessed can get access to mutations. Yes, if you got the wrong mutations on your hero, you can throw the hero away. But you can buy trained heroes later on, and they might have the mutations you seek. And with the mutation, their damage potential, or their potential in total, is far, far greater than each and every one of the other hero classes. Of course you don't take the Possessed, because he can wear no heavy armor. Of course you don't take the Marauder, because he cannot wear heavy armor. You take the Magister, you take Mutants, and you take Dark Souls. Now you say, but Dark Souls are not the best henchmen around. Why? Why? The Sisters of Sigmar, they have the Doomweeds, which gets a 5% dodge bonus. Hooray. The Skaven have the Vermingard. They get immunity to Warpstone. Hey. The human mercenaries get guys that get a damage to hit bonus of 20% after the first attack. They have 2 attacks. Way. Great. The Cult of the Possessed are immune to fear, terror, and all alone checks. They're Dark Souls. That means the Dark Souls will never run away, which means they will never get stabbed in the back like all the others when they're surrounded. Give them heavy armor, give them a helmet, give them the skills, give them a shield, and they will stay and win the fight for you. Well, at least they will stay and fight long enough that you can get your reinforcements into order. If you say, I cannot live without the warp guards because I like their heavy armor and speed combination, then be happy, because the Cult of the Possessed is able to recruit Skaven henchmen later on, if they get something from the Smuggler's Den, if they rise their levels in the Smuggler's Den, then they can recruit those guys. But I recommend the Dark Souls, nevertheless. So, what I'm saying is, I think that the best way, or the most effective way to play this game, to have the most effective warband, is to have a stable defense, keep your people alive, and still dish out a lot of damage, if not the most maximum damage possible. And that is done with shield, sword, blood offering, heavy armor, and a helmet. And some skills. I hope I can show you that, and I hope you're interested to see how this develops, and how this gets working, and what potential lies in there. And I will show that in a new series of Let's Plays with my new warband, the No Fair Fights. And I hope you enjoy, I hope you participate, I hope that you tell me what you think, and if I have any flaws in my thinking, I would like to know that. See you all there, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and see you then. Bye!